Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we trade in personal finance advice for entertaining conversations about money, and would like to suggest to yogurt companies that they emboss rather than stamp the expiration date on their yogurt cups. I shouldn't have to risk it all for a late night snack just because the expiration date is smudged off. We are here, another wonderful day in the neighborhood. Malcolm here on Manage Your Damn Money, sir. What is going on with you this week, man? How's it going?
Going good, man. I was feeling good. Nice weather outside. You know, birds are chirping, fish are jumping, all that stuff.
Indeed.
And then I just found out that everybody still hasn't seen Black Panther. And I'm a little bit upset about that.
Not everybody has seen the movie yet.
But I guess the good news is they've already made $500 million without those laggards. I won't call anybody out, but the folks who haven't seen it yet. So
Absolutely.
There's that.
Absolutely. Speaking of good weather, a while back we had a competition, you and I, about you running a so-called marathon. It turned out to be, how long did you run?
Half marathon.
13.1
miles to be exact.
Okay, to be exact.
If you must know.
Well, I have something that's coming up that's not 13.1, but it's close. I'm going to be doing the Cherry Blossom 10 miler, which is
10 miles. 10 miles.
You know what? I should have known.
After all the stuff you gave me about running 13, you should have lied to me, told me you were running 40, and then said, you know what? I'm only running 10. You should have taken the Malcolm approach, because then I didn't get a chance to give you enough, you know what, over the whole thing like you gave me.
That's hilarious, man. Well, I'm doing that in April, and I've gotten up to 5 miles just recently, like a couple days ago. And it didn't
50% away from D-Day.
Indeed. So are you
running for time, or are you just running for completion?
I'm just running for completion, man.
Oh, you'll be there.
Yeah. I'm just trying to make it. I'll take a walk here and there if I need to. So that's coming up. Really excited about that. But of course, you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we have entertaining conversations about money. This episode's conversation at hand is a conversation with brick and mortar business owner Meaghan Murphy. We're going to learn a little bit about what Meaghan Murphy does. She's the head of a company that recently just went through a transition. They were called the Capital City Cheesecake in Tacoma Park, and now they've changed their name and changed what they do to Capital City Confectionery. So we're talking about that and transitions and what it means to actually make a transition. But as we always do in every show, it is now time for headlines. 3 things married couples should do when buying a home together. Oh, correct that, Malcolm.
Unmarried people.
Unmarried couples should do when buying a home together. People do that, I guess. February 2018 article by Beth who's
Dude,
a woman named Beth.
These names up.
A woman named Beth on nerdwallet.com lays out 3 things unmarried couples should do when deciding to buy a home or property together. So we're talking about unmarried couples. 16% of all first-time home buyers in 2017 were unmarried couples, an annual National Association of Realtors report found. The highest share the organization has recorded since 1981, which is pretty crazy. So people are like getting in homes together unmarried a little bit more frequently than since 1981. But many couples don't realize how risky buying a home with an unmarried partner can be. Here's how to overcome these risks with some planning, a good lawyer, and slightly awkward conversation or two. So the first one, Malcolm, is that dreaded, at least for some, P word. You know what that is?
Prenup.
Better sign a prenup. Signing a prenup and co-ownership contract with the help of a legal professional before closing on the house. Documents should answer questions like, what happens to the property if you guys split, obviously? What happens if one of you becomes disabled or dies? And then also, who pays the utility bills for major repairs? So things that outline who's responsible for what can be helpful. Also, you got to choose the right title, the article says. Sole ownership. Only one name is recorded on the deed, so that's what sole ownership is. And the person has all the rights and responsibilities of ownership. So that means only one person would control the house, essentially, right, or owns the house, essentially. The pros of sole ownership are it may yield tax savings if your incomes are drastically different. So you have to consider what your incomes are and how that might affect like the situation. And if your partner has bad credit, applying for a home loan in your name only may help with the approval because that person's bad credit isn't on the actual application. And then remember that ownership rights are determined by the names on the deed, not the mortgage. So you got to get the name on the deed if you want to have control of the house. The con of a sole ownership situation, if the relationship ends, you're not on the title, you risk walking away with nothing, even if you contributed money to purchase the home. So if
That's
you
why
like,
you better get that one in writing.
yeah, definitely. Because if y'all split, you don't want to walk away having contributed 10 grand to like the whole process and you don't get anything out of it. Another option is called joint tenancy. Each person owns 50% of the property. If a tenant dies, their share automatically transfers to the other joint tenant.
So that one I think is key.
Okay.
Like I knew that you could have joint tenancy for bank accounts, brokerage accounts, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know that you could actually calibrate the ownership percentage
Really?
for what that ownership is,
Right.
which is huge.
Absolutely.
And you know, we'll get a little bit more into the details, but that was like the biggest takeaway when I read this. And by the way, this article by Beth Buczynski.
Oh, that's how you say it?
Just in case she happens to hear this podcast or watch our show, I want to make sure we got it right.
Well, there
so
we
Miss
go.
Buczynski, there's your just due.
I apologize, Beth, for ruining your last name. But of course, a pro of joint tenancy, as Malcolm said, joint tenants enjoy the right of survivorship, so you won't have to worry about fighting estates or relatives for the house in the event of your partner's death. So that means that it automatically transfers to you if your partner were to die or something else were to happen. A con of joint tenancy, an unfriendly breakup could spell trouble, especially if one partner can't or won't buy the other out. So like if you don't have enough money to buy that person out, then it's going to be a fight somewhere,
right.
Most likely in a courtroom. And then there's another situation or scenario that you can, kind of structure your documents around. That's called tenants in common, which allows unequal ownership. So you could own a 75% stake while your partner owns 25%, and that can account for like differences in income, of course.
Well, also differences in who contributed what.
Sure.
So if our down payment is $20,000, you put in 5, I put in 15.
Right.
Well, then there's that 75-25 breakdown you just gave.
Absolutely.
Where by normal standards, we'd be 50-50 just because we both signed on the dotted line together no matter what.
Absolutely. A pro of tenants in common. Ownership shares can be tailored to match the financial contributions, as Malcolm said. And if paid more towards the down payment, for example, you can own a larger percentage. So, again, you can do a sliding scale in terms of what works for you and your partner. And, of course, a con for tenants in common. If one tenant dies, the other has no automatic rights to that person's share of the property unless named in the will or living trust. So I think that's a place where like family members can come in and say, that's our 25% type thing.
Sell your house and put you out.
Indeed. And this was a big one that I put in bold on the script. Leave your parents at home. Because that's a really big deal.
That's a lot easier said than done.
You think so?
I definitely.
I'm sure for some people it's difficult.
Well, I mean, your folks are probably already on heightened alert.
Sure.
That you're telling them that you're going to get in, especially, assuming this is, a couple, right? So your parents are probably already on heightened alert because you're doing what the old folks would refer to as shacking up. So they're already not that excited
Living in
about the
sin
idea to begin with, right? So then you also have the idea that you're making this financial commitment to this person, even though you guys aren't affianced or all the way married. So you have that aspect of it too. So if I'm, the parent, I'm looking at this saying I want to be as involved as possible so that I can help guide my side, my child, toward the best possible outcome for them. So I think it's going to be tough to keep your parents out of the situation.
That's true. The article makes mention of the fact that if there's fewer emotions involved, the better, because involving parents adds unnecessary confusion and drama to the process, because obviously you bring your family drama to the table, mix it with another bit of family drama, and then you have a whole bunch of drama over trying to buy a house. It's interesting because, I shared this on one of our first episodes, that my wife and I are like we've already signed on the proverbial dotted line for a house and whatnot. But even when we did it, I was like, I know we married, but now we really like now it's really a wrap.
This sold you on it?
Well, what I'm saying is I can't imagine what it would feel like to go in unmarried, right? On a property.
Yeah.
When I was feeling more stress signing those documents than maybe I did standing at the altar.
So as I was
He was like, yeah.
I'm apologize in advance for you because you got to go home, right? So there's that. He's sorry. But besides that, I was reading this and I'm thinking I would like to know the percentage of times that this worked out the right way.
Well, yeah.
Like the way you wanted it to.
Sure.
Meaning either it didn't go well, it being the relationship, and you guys both exited amicably and you walked away with what you intended to.
Right.
Or it went really well, you guys got married, you're still together, you got 17 kids and a white picket fence and all that good stuff. I'd like to know what the percentage of times that actually happened that way.
Sure.
Because as I'm reading this, and this might be the pessimist in me,
Right.
I'm like, man, this looks bad. But as we've talked about so many times on this show, the rent just keeps going up, to the point that a lot of younger folks, our millennial cohort, they're moving in together just to be able to afford this rent that is just ridiculously high in places like D.C. and New York and California and wherever else.
Right, having a girlfriend or boyfriend is like a financial consideration.
Right, it's like and then you got the people that can't break up because they can't afford to. So then there's that aspect of it too, right?
Well, I gotta go face this studio prices.
Well, can I afford a studio in D.C.? Right. That might be the same thing as buying a really nice 5-bedroom house in North Carolina somewhere. So there's that aspect of it too.
That's hilarious, indeed. Real quick, to me it sounds like that's like a pit of misery that's waiting for you at the bottom of that barrel. Like at least if you're anyway. I don't want to get into that. We want to remind people you can always
back that truck up.
I'm gonna back that truck up. We want to remind people you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money. You can always catch past episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. And if you leave us a review, we would be very thankful because that helps us go up in the ratings. It helps more people see the show and will listen to the show and watch it. And of course, if you have questions for Malcolm, we're now doing his Malcolm's Money Minute. Send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. You can also follow us on social media to always see what's going on. What's your social media handle, Malcolm?
At Malcolm on Money.
And of course, mine is at MYDM1, and that's both on Twitter and what's the other one? Instagram. And then, of course, facebook.com/Manage Your Damn Money. We're going to take a quick music break. When we come back, the conversation at hand, evolving as a small business, a conversation with brick and mortar business owner Meaghan Murphy. We're going to talk to her about what it means to evolve when you're a small business. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. Today's conversation at hand for this episode, evolving as a small business, a conversation with a brick and mortar business owner, Miss Meaghan Murphy. Before we get on with Meaghan, for those with side hustles and or entrepreneurial dreams, you often start out with one vision and become wed to it. However, more seasoned entrepreneurs can tell you sometimes what you set out to do has to change and morph to meet the needs of your clients or the needs of your situation. You don't always get to do what you want to do, but what the moment necessitates. In this episode of MYDM, we're taking a look at the importance of being flexible with your entrepreneurial pursuits to better understand just how important it is to be able to pivot and shift your business focus at a moment's notice. Malcolm, when you think of flexibility in entrepreneurial pursuits, what does that mean to you?
Basically not being wed to the first idea you had that got you paid in the beginning.
That makes sense.
Because people will get tired of you.
Okay.
So eventually you have to go to where they are instead of where you want them to be.
Absolutely. Can you think of any examples of people who have made business pivots or even maybe even like career pivots?
So Slack, for example, which is the corporate messaging system that a lot of people use, people may not know they started out as an online game.
Oh, okay.
And the game was just terrible, and nobody really cared about playing it.
Right.
But what they found was there are a bunch of people using the messenger system that was embedded in the game itself, and they were using that to send each other pictures and so on and so on. And Flickr was born out of that same situation.
Absolutely.
Netflix used to sell DVDs exclusively to our
out the trunk,
to our front door, right, through the mail system.
Right.
And now they probably can't spell DVD at Netflix, right? So,
right,
people
absolutely.
like that.
And to that point, we pulled a story, a 2013 Forbes.com contribution by Jason Nassar, 14 famous business pivots. First one is Twitter, believe it or not. Odeo, I guess that's what the name used to be. Odeo began as a network where people could find and subscribe to podcasts, ironically. But founders feared the company's demise when iTunes began taking over the podcast niche, or now Apple Podcast. After giving the employees 2 weeks to come up with new ideas, the company decided to make a drastic change and run with the idea of a status updating microblogging platform. So it started out, it was called Odeo, which doesn't even sound like a thing. I thought there was a typo when I was looking at it. Another one, which is a really well-known name, PayPal.
Yep.
It was developed by a company called Confectionery in 1999. Take it back to the 1999s and 2000s.
And think about what was happening in 1999. .com bubble was
right. .com bubble. That is true. In 1999, this company allowed people to beam payments from their PDAs. Do you remember PDAs?
I do.
The Palm.
I had a Palm Trio.
Wow.
That was like the top notch, as good as it got before the iPhone came and killed the game.
I do remember that.
Wow, that felt like I just dropped a hot 16 that you guys didn't catch that. Anyway.
So PDAs, it was something you could beam payments from PDA to PDA or from smartphone to smartphone. And after merging with a financial services company called X.com, PayPal became the preferred online payment system for eBay sellers, which propelled it to its name into payment processing fame. So that's an interesting one. Another one, which most people are familiar with for their morning fix, Starbucks. They started off in 1971 selling espresso makers and coffee beans. I mean, that's a little bit more closely aligned, but even so, to have stores is kind of like a big deal. And then also, as you mentioned, Flickr was used to be called, what was it?
I don't remember the name of the game.
The name's not even here, but it was an online role-playing game, and it's called Game Never Ending.
Oh, right.
So
okay.
That's an interesting name. That's why I couldn't find it on here, because it didn't look like a name.
Our computer nerds that listen to the show would recognize it.
Indeed.
That's the only people that played it.
Right, and so apparently the game included a photo sharing tool, which Malcolm mentioned, which turned out to be one of the most popular aspects of the game. And the company decided to leverage this to create the now popular Flickr, which is like a photo sharing, housing kind of website.
Take your word for it.
Another of our favorite, where we say doing it for the gram, Instagram is the most widely used photo app for the iPhone, but many don't know its original origins. Instagram began as Burbn, so BURBN, Bourbon, a check-in app that included gaming elements from Mafia Wars. and a photo element as well. The creators were worried bourbon had too much clutter and potential actions. It would never gain traction, so they took a risk and stripped all the features but one, the photos. And hence now we have doing it for the gram, which is like a cultural thing, I guess, which started with doing it for the Vine.
And Facebook bought them for however many billions of dollars
Indeed.
a mistake.
Another one, which is kind of a ode to back in the day, because everybody remembers the grandma who had this product sitting on her countertop, Avon. Avon is one of the most popular names in makeup, whose products are sold by beauty representatives throughout the world. It started, however, with a similar history to Wrigley. David H. McConnell was a traveling book salesman, and he realized that his female customers were more interested in the free samples of perfume that came with the books than the books themselves. He began recruiting women to sell his perfume product, believing they would be able to relate and sell to one another better than male salesmen. And that's the beginning of Avon, which is a perfect example. Like, he started off selling books to women and giving them like sample perfume as like, here, buy my books.
Right.
He noticed the women liked the perfume more, so he was like, oh, throw the books away. Here's the perfume. And that's how Avon became a thing.
But it takes a special kind of business owner / general person to see that and be able to adjust to it.
Sure.
Because a lot of times entrepreneurs get stuck with the concept, the idea that got them there in the first place.
Absolutely.
And you're so wed to it that it's like, no, this thing has to work.
Right.
And so your customers are telling you, I want to buy perfume.
Right.
And you're saying, but I'm a book salesman.
I got these books, man.
Jeff Bezos started Amazon to sell books.
Right.
Now Amazon sells everything but books almost, right? So, I mean, you can still buy books on Amazon, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Bezos, don't come get me. But you know what I'm saying. Like,
Right.
I can buy tires for my Jeep on Amazon.
Right.
The books are secondary at this point. So just not being so wed to the idea that
Right.
you miss the opportunity that's out there,
Absolutely.
I think is probably like 99% of the battle.
Right. Do people make pivots professionally? I feel like, well, with the 2008 recession, that's the first thing that came to mind.
Well, you know, also though, we being younger people, I hate this word, but you know, we millennial people are notorious for making job pivots all the time.
Right.
There's another word I can't stand, pivot. that is corporate buzzword bingo,
Right.
center square. Pivot.
Another one you hate, circle the wagons.
Oh man, we could do a whole show on corporate buzzwords.
We should do
but
that.
anyway, yeah. So I mean, you know, people our age tend to change what they're doing more frequently than the generations before us.
Right.
Some would say to a fault, and others would say it's liberating and it's taking control of your future. But I think it's important to be willing to kind of make those changes if that's what it takes to get you where you're trying to get to.
Absolutely. Well, that's some pivots, and that'll tie well into the conversation that we'll be having today with an actual brick and mortar business owner later in the show. But before we move on to another music break, and on the other side of that music break, we'll have Malcolm's Money Minute. A quick reminder, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify are all places you can listen to our show. So simply download the app or, search Manager Damn Money and you'll find us. Be sure to leave us a review there. If you have a question that you want us to answer, you want Malcolm to respond to, send it to us, info@managerdamnmoney.com. And of course, if you want to follow us on social media, simply follow Malcolm where?
At Malcolm on Money.
And of course, mine is at MYDM1. This is Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back.
It probably goes without saying that rookie homeowners tend to focus only on the size of their future mortgage payment and not on the additional costs that come along with buying your first home. According to a 2017 analysis conducted by online home buying site Zillow, those additional costs could reach as much as $10,000. Of course, the costs vary significantly depending on where you're buying your house. Things like taxes and insurance differ from region to region. However, they should both be estimated and included in the monthly payment calculation when deciding how much house you can actually afford. Additionally, the cost of home maintenance and improvement projects such as painting, carpet cleaning, HVAC maintenance, and easy repairs like that could easily add thousands of dollars to that initial purchase price. And then there's the question of kitchen appliances. Does the price you're paying include appliances you saw when you toured the house, or will the sellers be taking them with them before you close? If so, prepare to spend another couple $1,000s. And speaking of closing costs, things like loan origination fees, application fees, appraisal fees, credit report fees, inspection fees, prepaid interest fees, making us print all this paperwork fees. Okay, maybe I made that last one up, but you get the idea. Closing costs add up, and it's an additional few $1,000s to your purchase price each time. They're typically due the day you officially take ownership of the home. Determining how much that home will ultimately cost you each year is one of the most challenging aspects of home buying, especially for the first-time buyers. But it's extremely important that you get that math right before you sign on the dotted line. I'm Malcolm Ethridge, licensed financial advisor, and this has been your Money Minute.
And of course, if you have a question for Malcolm that you'd like him to respond to, simply send this to us at info@managerdamnmoney.com. But without further ado, today's conversation at hand, evolving as a small business owner, a conversation with brick and mortar business owner Meaghan Murphy. Having a business means you have to be ready to change what your business does. In this segment of the show, we're talking to this young woman whose business, Capital City Cheesecake, or now Capital City Confectionery, has morphed multiple times since it opened in Tacoma Park 8 years ago. Meaghan Murphy and her sister turned a love for making cheesecake into a full-blown sandwich, coffee, and ice cream shop. It's a brick and mortar place where you have to actually go. Meaghan knows all about morphing and changing to meet the needs of her family's entrepreneurial moment. So Meaghan, first of all, welcome to Manage Your Damn Money.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely, absolutely. So why don't you quickly tell us about the quick history of, so let me ask you this, because I know it's been different stages. How did Capital City Cheesecake start?
The simple explanation is that me and my sister were going through transitions in both of our lives. So I was 25 and she was 27. And I was graduating college with my business degree, and she was going through her own transition from being a preschool teacher and exploring new career options. And so a friend of her asked to make a cheesecake. She started baking them, and then friends start kind of convincing you, like, that's a really good cheesecake. But if it's your mom telling you, you're like, you're my biggest fan. Right. So it took some honest friends, like, are you being honest? Or they're like, no, I'm telling you, you can sell this cheesecake. And so I was on a couch. It was a couch idea, as they always say. And the light bulb went off, and I was like, all right, let's just start doing it for fun, start making some extra holiday money. Next thing you know, I'm signing a 5-year lease.
Wow. So you had your own focus group kind of built in right there.
I did. I wanted to do a test market at first, and so we invited out, like, The thing is, when you want to do a test market, you invite your friends, but tell them to invite friends that you don't know.
Right. Sure.
Because once again, your friends are going to sugarcoat it. Right. And so we invited about 20 friends, and they invited additional. So we had 40 people that came out. Okay. And then what happened was a chef bought a cheesecake at the event and then took it back to the restaurant, and they fell in love. And they were like, we want your cheesecake. Right. The issue is I was baking out of a house. Right.
A single oven.
So a single oven.
Right.
And so then I was like, okay, like what does it take to go from, a home business to renting a kitchen? We weren't ready for the actual building.
Okay. Sure.
And so once we started that process, we ended up renting a kitchen space out of a restaurant. Okay. And the issue was I really wanted to get someone to review our cheesecake. I needed someone to say, this is legit. So I sent out 50 different emails to the Gazette, the Washington Post, you name it. And then this online blogger named Lee Lambert at the time found it and was like, sure, I'll come try it. And if it's good, I'll write. But she was the Washington Post. So it didn't matter that it was an online blogger. Right. And so she came out, and at that time we were just in this little kitchen. So when she posted the story, everybody wanted to visit. Right. But we were not in a place where you could actually come. Okay. And so at that point, the demand started, do we continue the wholesale route or do we welcome customers?
Absolutely.
Do we take that leap of faith?
Absolutely. And you did. So when was the transition from the renting kitchen space to the brick and mortar space that's in Tacoma Park?
So what happens is I grew up in Brooklyn, DC, okay. And so we were first looking to be in the neighborhood. But at that time, DC is going through a lot of transitions. Right. And so just to get a basic, not even having drywall or a bathroom, right. The rent was so expensive. So I started doing research. Research is critical in everything I do. And I was like, I need to find a turnkey business. Yeah. I need to find a food establishment that went out of business. Because different than the cup, so we were during the Georgetown cupcake, it was all happening, right? And so we were like, okay, let's kind of ride this wave and take full-size cheesecakes to miniature cheesecakes. Right. And the issue was okay, we need refrigerators. Right. Cupcakes don't require refrigeration. Right. And so I needed to find a place that had a kitchen, and I needed a lot of refrigerators. Right. And so when we started looking, Savory at that time, that's the building that we moved into, went out of business about 6 months prior, and they were a cafe. And we walked in, and all I saw was refrigerators, right. Tables, a sink. Right. I mean, just to let you know, a hood costs $40,000. Right. So the hood was there. The triple bin sink can cost you $15,000.
It was all there.
It was there. Out. We had to do a good deep clean.
Right.
We had to get that elbow grease up in there.
Right.
But I wanted to look for a turnkey, and I found one, and that's what made us pick that location at the time.
It's amazing that a refrigerator was your selling point.
I walked in
or multiple refrigerators was your selling point.
It was just there they are. Refrigerators cost $3,000. Right.
So a recurring theme on this show tends to be people who find their passion. They figure out a way to turn that passion into a side hustle. Okay. And then they ultimately are faced with the decision of turning that side hustle into a full-blown business. Right. It sounds like in this case, it kind of just happened on its own, and you didn't really have a choice.
It did. It was like a snowball that starts small, and then it keeps rolling down the mountain, and next thing you're so when I felt at that moment we all signed the lease and my parents had to sign, be our co-signers, I was like, maybe they'll pull out. Or, we were kind of well, we all kind of here now.
Waiting on somebody to be the
playing
one.
chicken.
Yeah, we were if you don't want to, just wink real quick. And no one winked. And so we're okay, great. But at the time, I was 25. Mm-hmm. My son was 10. Right. I had a family. And I'm I didn't even know, and this sounds silly, but this is where I was. I was where am I going to buy, all these cleaning supplies in bulk? Where do you get coffee sleeves in bulk? I had never gone down, Costco clearly now, but at that time, they answer all of that.
$50, $60, $100, it's
yeah.
That's funny.
Or Amazon, but at this point.
So, I forgot what I was going to ask you, but we've kind of been talking about the history of the business. Fast forwarding to your current understanding of how it works. What's something that it's been able to do for you and your family as an individual and as a family in terms of finances, like the way that it's operated for you as a pillar for you individually and as a family?
I mean, in terms of like what it's done for us as a family, we definitely had to learn each other's love language. So I know we talk about love language like in a marriage, but when it comes to working with your family, there has to be some like boundaries. Right. And so what it's done for us is we found found respect for each other. But, and so knowing my sister's love language, knowing these little cues, because it's extremely unprofessional to be sisters when there's a line forming and an employee's making a mistake, and I just want to tell her, like, get it together. Like, I want to talk to her
the way you would as a sister.
Right? And she's like, no, that's, you can't just talk. I'm like, okay. So learning each other's love language, knowing, nonverbal cues was important. But the other thing that's kind of like emerged from the rebrand is when we all sat down, I was like, I think we're in the wrong positions in the company. Okay. And so figuring out the buyer, not the buyer, figuring out who's the seller, who's the creator, who's basically the person that packages it and brands it. It was critical, and I think we were all in the wrong positions. And so being able to sit down and say, like, you've been head of the bakery and you're in the wrong position, I should be the head of the bakery. That came out of 8 years of lessons.
Oh, wow. So giving everybody a lane.
Everyone has to have a lane. Yeah, my sister is the creator. She used to be in operations. She has stepped out. So she creates. She's the visionary. She's the one that always is bringing new life. And then we have the baker. I mean, that's your everyday person. And so we have someone who's been with her for 8 years. She makes it every day. And then I take it and I brand it. I package it. And then we actually brought in a PR person and they sell it. I used to be in the seller position and I wasn't doing a great job. I was like, I can make it look pretty, but I'm not going to go out to a networking event and convince you why my cheesecake's the best cheesecake. So having those like team players in place.
That makes sense. And I don't know if we said it, eventually after the stage of when you guys went from the kitchen, you transitioned into the turnkey place, and then you were selling coffee, cheesecake, food, sandwiches, salads, all kinds of things. You could be there all day buying all kinds of things. And so that was like the full iteration that I actually was introduced to it as.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about, and this is an interesting thing because you're the first actual guest that we've had that we can say this about. You are our first guest who has a brick and mortar business.
That's why you kept putting so much emphasis on it.
If you couldn't tell.
Yes.
If you couldn't tell. So what's one of the challenges or things that you've learned, not necessarily the challenges, but good things, bad things that you've learned about having a brick and mortar business with employees, staff, and real estate and equipment and a whole bunch of other things to manage? What are some top level things?
Well, okay, so one thing, there's two that kind of stand out. The first is the show must go on. And when you don't have customers walking the door, when you don't have a set time, when I have to unlock that door, and if we open at 9 o'clock, we open. If we close at 5, we close at 5. And so, and if you don't, you have to explain yourself to the public. So the customers are your bosses a lot of the time. And I think people are like, well, when you're an entrepreneur, you don't have a boss. No, those customers are going to keep
Where were you, Meaghan?
Yeah, what happened? I saw a sign. Was there a family emergency? And you want to make sure you stay connected and at the same time have those boundaries and finding that balance. But the thing is, the show must go on. So whether or not I just dropped a cheesecake and the customer is going to be there in 15 minutes and in front of everybody, I have to say, unfortunately, what do you mean my order dropped? And now you're like, oh my gosh. You have to save face. You have to be the leader for your employees. They are watching your every moment. Your customers are waiting for your reactions. But at the end of the day, the show must go on. I ran out of coffee. I mean, there's been times the espresso machine just shut down. So what do? You can't just panic, when you're in a brick and mortar. You can't just hide. You can't. So that's one difference of when you have to open every single day. And the fact that if you close, that money, I mean, if it snows, that's like, the first time there was a snow, I stopped loving snow. I was like, everyone's like, it's gonna snow. I was like, I gotta get a snow plow. I mean, I have 20 parking spots. Where does the snow go? It gets pushed against. So that's the thing when I also had become a facility manager. I don't know about all this type of stuff. So that's one, and the second is systems. like to have a brick and mortar, you have to have solid systems. And in the E-Myth, there's a book by Michael Gerber that I suggest everyone reads, and he talks about systems. And you want to be able to hire ordinary people and teach them extraordinary skills, not hire extraordinary people and try to put them in an ordinary job. Oh, wow. And that is because if you have solid systems, I can take you and in a week to 2 weeks get you fully like involved in our company. And you have to have that, because in the brick and mortar, if you have a turnover, like you have to open no matter what.
Right. Absolutely.
And so those are the two systems, and the show must go on.
Okay. We want to remind people you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We're talking to Meaghan Murphy about what it's like to run a brick and mortar business. Malcolm, you had a question?
Well, so speaking of kind of making that adjustment to being the business owner, the CEO, putting your CEO hat on when it's time to, there's constantly changes around things like legislation, taxes, all that kind of stuff that affect you. Being in this business 8+ years now, what are some of the things that you've seen happen like that have come your way? And kind of what are some of the advices maybe you would give to folks listening and watching that could help them sidestep some of those hurdles?
Right. So when we started, it was 2010. We were still in a recession. And that is really like critical to what I'm going to say, is because when I did my business plan, I did it during a recession. I did not foresee some of the regulation changes coming down the pipeline. So when I first got wind of the minimum wage increasing to $10.10 in Maryland, I was like, okay, like, you know, small businesses are always around $9, $10. So that was like not too much of a stretch. And I felt like, great, we should get corporations to the place that small businesses are at. So I backed it. Then where Montgomery County moved to $11.50, and what happened is...
And Tacoma Park is in Montgomery County.
Tacoma Park is in Montgomery County. And so here's the best way I can describe, because you guys were talking about marathons earlier, and this is a great way for me to kind of tie that in.
Half marathon, 10 mile, or whatever that is. But go on.
You know, I'm proud of both of you. Okay, so when Montgomery County said we had to get to $11.50 by 2017, I was like, okay, I have to grow my company, because we were cheesecakes and coffees, just regular coffee, and then we went cheesecake and espresso. And then I was like, okay, we have to get all these employees to $11.50, because when you take the bottom pay and you move it to $11.50, the $11.50 worker wants $12.50, the $12.50 worker wants $13.50, the $13.50 wants $14.50.
Wow.
So I was like, we have to move fast. And so it's like when you're running a marathon, you're like, okay, I just got to get to the end. And I got to the end, and once I was like, I'm winded, they're like, you got to get to 15. And I was like, but I put everything into building this cafe, and to get 20 workers to 15 means that for the next few years I have to do more pay raises, and to do that across 20 employees, our business concept wasn't going to thrive.
So your reaction, your response, your solution to them imposing a minimum raise hike on you was not to cut staff and make people work longer hours. It was to hire more people to do the job so that you guys were more efficient?
So our solution was to look at growth opportunities. And the cafe had run its course, okay, because we built our concept, our know your target. That's when you build, business plan, who's your target market? And ours was families. Because just myself, like I have 3 boys, one's mine and one's my stepkids. And when we go out to get burgers, we try to find affordable food. And so what we wanted to create at Capital City Cheesecake when we were that brand was amazing ambiance, the fast casual concept. It's like the Nando's, amazing ambiance, good food, but you didn't have a server. Okay, so we had pushed our price points the first round to get to $11.50. I'd already raised my prices across the board. So to take a Reuben from $10 to $11 to $12 to $13, we were moving into being a whole new company, which would be a restaurant, which was way beyond what I was comfortable with. I started as a bakery and now I'm a restaurant. So our goal was to go back to what we originally started and to see where the growth opportunities were, and that was going to be in the bakery side and bringing on events.
And that brings us to the moment that we are in. You're sitting here in front of us with a new shirt on.
A new shirt, yes.
You used to have red shirts.
It was
and
red.
Now you have black shirts, and it
Yes.
reads Capital City Confectionery. Talk to us about the pivot now that you're making for the company, and which I think is a perfect example of what it means to kind of move to a different thing, even though it's the same thing. Like, talk about what it is, what you guys are going to do there, and how it's going to work.
Right, and so like I wanted to kind of touch back on like if you were like a sole proprietor, for example, and you decided to, like, you were cutting hair and that was your passion, you decided to open up your own brick and mortar. The thing is that you have to understand, to grow up for an entrepreneur, you always have to have someone who's a visionary. And so if you're cutting hair, like, who's growing the business, and when you're growing the business, who's cutting the hair? And so in our concept, what I had to like start thinking about was like, I had fell into being a technician and a manager more than I was a visionary. And so I had to design a business concept that allowed me to be the leader, to hire the manager, and then to have the technicians at work every single day. And so Capital City Confectionery, we kind of sat down at a table, there's 4 of us, it's my parents involved, and we're like, what do you want out of the business? And so for me, I wanted to continue the bakery, and my sister wanted to be more like just a creator. I'll make you an amazing recipe, but I don't want to be here every single day. Right. And then my parents wanted to create a community space for people to still come out and enjoy and have life memories. And so Capital City Confectionery is an interactive bakery where you can come out. We're going to have like cookie decorating classes. We're going to be, you can host your baby showers and bridal showers, or you could just come in and get your cheesecake. And so we're kind of like one company that has all different ways for you to interact with us.
So it belongs to the community.
It will always belong to the community, and I am starting, part of the company will be confectionery conversations, and my passion, and always knowing what your why is. My why is to always be like the positive force that tips the balance of the universe towards love. And what drives me and how I do it is teaching. And the reason I love to teach is because I love to learn. And so a part of the business will be these confectionery conversations where we're allowing people to teach people about things that are important to the community. So the thing was either just walk away, cut our losses, that was an option, or could we actually all sit down and say, like, if we had $10 million, $1 million, 500,000, 5,000, and we could just do what we want to do, what would we do? And that's what we did.
Okay, excellent. Got a last question for you, but we want to remind people you're listening and watching Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We have Meaghan Murphy here. She's the CEO, owner, and visionary of Capital City Confectionery now. Last question for you, Meaghan. Explain the emotions of breaking up with your business model. And what would you tell other people who are considering a pivot in their own work or business or what they're doing, but are hesitant or apprehensive to let it go?
Breaking up with the business model is like breaking up with a good guy. I mean, sometimes you have 2 good people and they just realize they ran their course. Oh, wow. But it's not like, well, you don't want to trash the person. So like, were they cute? They were cute. Did they have a job? They had a job. Did they have a home? They had a home. So what was wrong? It was like, it was good when it was good, but sometimes you have to know when you're kind of going in different directions.
That's an amazing analogy.
It is. I followed you all the way. That makes sense.
So that's one. The second is when you're thinking about starting over or rebranding, because it was scary. And we closed down January 27th. We opened March 3rd. I had to renovate the whole building, restructure the whole company, and then rebrand. And the reason why I was able to do it in the time frame is because when you're climbing up the mountain for the first time, like, your goal is to be able to have this amazing view, but you didn't bring enough food. You didn't factor in the insects. You didn't bring camping gear that protects you from certain type of weather. So like up this mountain, like first you start all excited. That's how entrepreneurs I had the best idea. And you're like, yeah, let's go. And then the first bump, like, oh, it's okay. But by like halfway you start deciding, like, do I go back down? Well, I've already committed. I'm already. So then when you get up there, you're like, wow, this view is beautiful. To rebrand means I got up there and I saw another mountain and it was taller. But this time, instead of being afraid, I was excited because I know now. I have 8 years of lessons that I get to use. So now it's more like, let's do this and let's have fun.
Man, you are
And
so good with
that's
analogies.
I'm just like marinating.
I'm in
on
the story
those.
with her. I'm
You
like
down a
climbing the
mountain,
mountain. I'm like, is there snow on this mountain? What's going on? Like,
You know?
Is the sun out? Is it overcast?
But you know, when you get to that top and you see the other mountain, you're like, and that's what, when you hear entrepreneurs, it's like you get to a point where like, it's not fear, like it's like faith. You just know, and that's how I feel. Like I'm able to, it took me 8 years to do what I'm doing in a month.
Right.
Because I have 8 years
Of experience.
of experience.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we want to thank you, Meaghan, for coming on and telling your story.
Yeah.
Capital City Cheesecake now to Capital City Confectionery. If people want to learn more or want to follow what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, where can they visit?
CapitalCityConfectionery.com, and then we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Pinterest, we're on all those different platforms.
Pinterest,
so.
where you spend more money, apparently. Indeed. Well, we want to thank our listeners and those who are watching for joining us for another episode of MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We want to remind you, you can always catch past episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. There you can also leave us a review. Tell us what you think. That helps us go up in the ratings. And also, if you have a question for us or for Malcolm that you want him to respond to for his Money Minute, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. Of course, you can always follow us on social media. Malcolm, what's your handle?
At Malcolm on Money.
And of course, mine is at MYDM1. And you can always catch us also on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. Thanks to our partners and our crew here at Montgomery Community Media. Until next time, be good with your money.
Peace.
Peace.